Dr. Elena Vasquez kept her eyes down as she walked through the corridors of the Galactic Research Station. The other scientists barely noticed her presence, which was exactly how she preferred it. At 28, she was the youngest human aboard the massive space station that orbited the neutral zone between three major alien civilizations. Elena had spent the last 3 years studying ancient alien technologies in the station's deepest laboratories. While her colleagues attended conferences and gave speeches about their discoveries, she worked alone in the shadows. The alien researchers thought humans were weak and primitive. They tolerated Elena's presence only because Earth had provided significant funding for the station. The Zephyrians, with their crystal-like skin and towering height, looked down on all carbon-based life forms. The Morphians could change their shape at will and considered themselves superior to any fixed-form species. The Vortakians were a warrior race with 4 arms and enhanced strength who saw humans as nothing more than fragile children. Elena's supervisor, Dr. Crix of the Zephyrian race, barely acknowledged her work. He assigned her the most boring tasks and never included her in important meetings. When she tried to share her research findings, he dismissed them with a wave of his crystalline hand. The other alien scientists followed his lead, treating Elena like she was invisible. But Elena had discovered something extraordinary in the ancient ruins they were studying. The artifacts weren't just random pieces of technology. They were parts of a massive defense system created by a long-dead civilization called the Ancients. More importantly, the system was still partially functional, and Elena had figured out how to activate small portions of it. She had been testing her theories in secret, using abandoned sections of the station where no one would notice her experiments. The technology responded to her touch in ways that puzzled her. It was as if the ancient devices recognized something in humans that other species lacked. Elena's quiet nature wasn't weakness or fear. It was careful observation. She had learned to read the subtle body language of different alien species. She understood their cultural hierarchies and political tensions. While they saw her as a timid human female, she was actually gathering intelligence about potential threats to Earth. The station housed representatives from 12 different species, but tensions were rising between the 3 major powers. Elena had overheard conversations about territorial disputes and resource conflicts. Some species spoke openly about the need to eliminate weaker civilizations to make room for expansion. Elena's small laboratory was filled with ancient artifacts that other researchers had dismissed as broken or useless. She had spent countless hours studying their construction and energy patterns. Many of the devices seemed designed specifically for human physiology. The neural interfaces matched human brain patterns perfectly, while other species experienced painful feedback when they tried to use them. Late at night, when the station was quiet, Elena would practice with the ancient technology. She had learned to activate personal shields, energy weapons, and even limited teleportation devices. The artifacts seemed to enhance her natural abilities rather than replace them. Her reflexes became faster, her thinking clearer, and her physical strength increased dramatically. Elena's quarters were spartanly furnished, containing only the essentials. She kept detailed notes about her discoveries hidden in encrypted files that appeared to be routine research data. If anyone suspected what she had learned, it would create a panic throughout the station. The implications were staggering. Dr. Crix had recently announced a major presentation about the ancient civilization. He planned to share his groundbreaking discoveries with representatives from all 12 species. Elena knew that most of his conclusions were wrong, but she had stopped trying to correct him. Instead, she focused on preparing for what she sensed was coming. The political situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Vortakians had increased their military presence in the neutral zone. The Morphians were infiltrating other species' territories using their shape-shifting abilities. The Zephyrians were consolidating their technological advantages and cutting off access to their most advanced research. Elena had intercepted communications suggesting that the 3 major powers were planning to divide the galaxy between themselves. Smaller species would be enslaved or eliminated. Humans, being one of the newest spacefaring civilizations, were considered a minor inconvenience that could be dealt with easily. But Elena had found references in the ancient texts that changed everything. The previous galactic war hadn't ended with the ancients simply disappearing. They had hidden their most powerful technologies and left them for a specific species to find. All the clues pointed to humanity as the intended inheritors of this legacy. The artifacts Elena had been studying were just the beginning. Somewhere in the galaxy there were ancient weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. There were technologies that could create impenetrable defensive barriers around star systems. Most importantly, there were instructions for activating a network of automated defense platforms that could protect developing civilizations from aggressive expansion. Elena realized that her timid behavior had been the perfect disguise. While the alien species plotted against each other and dismissed humans as irrelevant, she had been unlocking the keys to galactic peace. The ancient technology wasn't just responsive to humans. It was specifically calibrated for human use. As she prepared for another night of secret research, Elena reflected on the irony of her situation. The aliens saw her as a weak, frightened human who posed no threat to anyone. They had no idea that the quiet scientist they ignored had become the most dangerous person on the station. Elena's hands moved confidently over the ancient control interfaces as energy patterns danced around her fingers. Soon she would have to reveal her true capabilities. The approaching crisis would force her hand, and when it did, the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of when pushed too far. The station's lights dimmed as Elena activated another ancient device. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she would continue preparing for the storm that was coming. The emergency alarm shattered the morning quiet of the research station. Elena looked up from her breakfast as red lights flashed throughout the dining hall. The automated voice announced a security breach in the restricted ancient artifact vault. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm and continue eating. Dr. Crix's voice boomed over the communication system, calling all senior researchers to the main conference room immediately. Elena wasn't invited, which meant she could investigate the situation without supervision. She finished her meal slowly, watching as alien scientists rushed past her table in obvious panic. The artifact vault contained the most dangerous and unstable ancient technology found in the ruins. Elena had been denied access to this section for months, despite her expertise with ancient systems. Dr. Crix claimed it was too dangerous for humans to handle such powerful artifacts, but Elena suspected he wanted to keep the most valuable discoveries for the Zephyrians. Elena made her way to the vault level, using service corridors that most aliens ignored. The station's security systems were designed by committee, with each species contributing their own technology. This created numerous blind spots that Elena had mapped during her 3 years aboard the station. The vault's outer chambers were filled with security drones and nervous guards from multiple species. Elena slipped past them using maintenance tunnels that connected to the environmental systems. Her small size, which the aliens saw as a weakness, allowed her to access areas that larger beings couldn't reach. Inside the vault, Elena found chaos. Someone had attempted to activate a large ancient device that resembled a crystalline tree, with energy flowing through its branches. The activation had failed catastrophically, creating feedback loops that were spreading to other artifacts. Several smaller devices were beginning to resonate dangerously. Elena recognized the central device from her research. It was a communication node designed to connect with the ancient defense network. Someone had tried to access it using brute force rather than understanding its proper activation sequence. The result was a cascading failure that threatened to destroy the entire vault. The security teams were evacuating artifacts to prevent further damage, but they didn't understand what they were dealing with. Elena watched in horror as guards handled devices that could explode if jostled incorrectly. They were treating priceless ancient technology like broken furniture. Elena stepped out of the shadows and approached the central device. The energy patterns were unstable, but she could see the problem. The activation sequence had been interrupted midway, leaving the device in a dangerous state between dormant and active. Without intervention, it would overload and potentially damage the station's power grid. A Vortakian guard spotted Elena and shouted for her to leave immediately. He grabbed her arm with one of his 4 hands, intending to forcibly remove her from the area. Elena twisted away from his grip with surprising agility and moved toward the device. The guard reached for his weapon, but Elena was already placing her hands on the ancient control surfaces. The device responded instantly to her touch, its energy pattern stabilizing as she input the correct shutdown sequence. The dangerous resonance in the other artifacts began to fade as the central node powered down safely. Dr. Crix arrived with a team of Zephyrian technicians just as Elena completed the shutdown procedure. His crystalline features darkened with anger when he saw her near the device. He demanded to know how she had accessed the secured vault, and why she had interfered with official security procedures. Elena explained that she had prevented a catastrophic failure that could have destroyed half the station. The device had been improperly activated and was creating dangerous feedback loops throughout the vault. Her intervention had saved countless irreplaceable artifacts and possibly prevented casualties. Dr. Crix dismissed her explanation and accused her of causing the problem in the first place. He claimed that only Elena had the knowledge to activate ancient devices, making her the prime suspect in the security breach. The other alien scientists nodded in agreement, eager to blame the human for the incident. Elena remained calm as accusations flew around her. She pointed out that the activation attempt showed clear signs of Zephyrian energy manipulation techniques. The crystalline scarring on the device's surface was characteristic of forced crystal resonance, a method that only Zephyrians used. Dr. Crix's own species was responsible for the damage. The evidence was undeniable, but Dr. Crix wasn't interested in facts. He ordered Elena confined to her quarters pending a full investigation. Security guards surrounded her, but Elena didn't resist. She had learned what she needed to know about the vault's contents and the aliens' true intentions. As Elena was escorted through the station corridors, she noticed increased military activity. Vortakian warriors were installing additional weapon systems in key locations. Morphian shapeshifters were replacing human and other alien crew members in sensitive positions. The Zephyrians were upgrading their communication arrays to military specifications. Elena's confinement gave her time to analyze what she had seen in the vault. The ancient device that had nearly overloaded was definitely a communication node, but it was more than that. It was also a command center for the defense network she had been studying. Someone had been trying to access the network to either control it or shut it down permanently. The timing wasn't coincidental. Elena's research had recently made breakthrough discoveries about ancient technology. If the aliens had been monitoring her work, they would know she was close to understanding the full scope of the defense network. The vault incident was likely an attempt to destroy evidence before she could piece everything together. Elena activated her hidden research files and began cross-referencing the vault's contents with her database of ancient artifacts. The pattern that emerged confirmed her worst fears. The three major powers weren't just planning to divide the galaxy. They were preparing to eliminate any trace of ancient technology that could threaten their dominance. The artifacts in the vault weren't random collections of ancient devices. They were specifically chosen components of the defense network's command structure. If these devices were destroyed or corrupted, the entire network would become inaccessible. Any species hoping to activate the ancient defenses would find only broken fragments. Elena realized that her discovery of the network's activation requirements had triggered a countdown. The aliens knew that humans could operate ancient technology in ways other species couldn't. They couldn't risk Elena or Earth gaining access to weapons that could challenge their supremacy. The failed activation attempt in the vault had been a cover story. The real goal was to damage the command nodes beyond repair while making it look like an accident. Elena's intervention had saved the devices, but it had also revealed her true capabilities to the alien leadership. As night fell over the station, Elena prepared for what was coming next. The aliens would move quickly now that they knew she understood their plans. They couldn't allow her to return to Earth or communicate with human authorities. The timid researcher they had ignored for 3 years had become their greatest threat. Elena smiled grimly as she activated ancient devices hidden throughout her quarters. Let them think she was trapped and helpless. Soon they would learn that underestimating humans was a mistake that would cost them everything they had schemed to achieve. Elena woke to the sound of her door being forced open. 3 Vortakian guards entered her quarters, their forearms carrying weapons designed to subdue rather than kill. Behind them stood Dr. Crix, his crystalline form glowing with barely contained energy. They had come to take her somewhere she wouldn't be found. The lead Vortakian spoke in broken English, telling Elena to come quietly or face painful consequences. Dr. Crix added that she was being transferred to a more secure location for intensive questioning about her knowledge of ancient technology. Elena knew this was a polite way of saying they planned to extract everything she knew before disposing of her. Elena stood slowly, her movements deliberately shaky and fearful. She stammered questions about her rights as a research station resident and begged to contact human authorities. The aliens exchanged satisfied looks, convinced that the frightened human woman posed no real threat to their plans. As they escorted Elena through the station corridors, she memorized every detail of their route. The guards were taking her to the station's detention levels, far from the main research areas where other species might witness what happened next. The corridors grew dimmer as they descended, with fewer security cameras and emergency stations. Elena counted 17 other species representatives as they passed through common areas. None of them intervened or even seemed curious about why a human researcher was being arrested. The aliens had spent years conditioning everyone to see humans as irrelevant, and that programming was working perfectly. The detention level contained holding cells designed for different alien physiologies. Elena was placed in a cell calibrated for human comfort, which meant the temperature and atmosphere were adjusted to slowly weaken her over time. The subtle changes would make her more compliant during interrogation, while appearing to be accidental environmental fluctuations. Dr. Crix dismissed the guards and activated privacy shields around Elena's cell. He explained that her interference in the vault had cost his species valuable time and resources. The ancient communication node she had saved was too dangerous to leave functional, and her knowledge of activation procedures made her a security risk. Elena listened quietly as Dr. Crix revealed the true scope of the alien conspiracy. The three major powers had been planning their galactic expansion for decades. They had allowed smaller species to develop spaceflight technology, only to identify and eliminate potential threats before they became problematic. Humanity had been marked for controlled extinction the moment they achieved faster-than-light travel. The research station assignment was Elena's species' final test. If humans proved unable to unlock ancient technology, they would be left as primitive vassals. If they showed dangerous potential like Elena had, they would be eliminated entirely. Dr. Crix's crystalline features shifted to display cruel satisfaction as he described Earth's fate. Human colonies would suffer tragic accidents that destroyed their infrastructure. Earth itself would be quarantined due to a dangerous plague that would conveniently kill only humans. Within a generation, humanity would exist only in historical records. Elena maintained her terrified expression while internally calculating the forces arrayed against her. The station housed nearly 300 aliens from 12 species, plus automated defense systems and military hardware. Even with ancient technology, direct confrontation seemed impossible. But Elena had advantages that Dr. Crix couldn't comprehend. Her 3 years of careful observation had taught her the weaknesses of every alien species aboard the station. More importantly, her secret research had revealed capabilities of ancient technology that even she was still discovering. When Dr. Crix left to arrange her formal interrogation, Elena activated devices hidden in her clothing. The aliens had searched her for obvious weapons but missed the ancient artifacts disguised as research equipment. Tiny energy nodes woven into her jacket's fabric created a localized field that disrupted the cell's monitoring systems. Elena's fingers traced patterns on the cell walls that looked like nervous scratching to any observers. In reality, she was activating dormant ancient circuitry embedded in the station's infrastructure. The previous galactic civilization had built their technology to last, and much of it remained functional after thousands of years. The station itself had been constructed around ancient ruins, incorporating their technology into supposedly modern systems. Elena had spent months mapping these hidden networks, learning to access power conduits and communication lines that the current inhabitants didn't know existed. Elena established contact with ancient monitoring stations throughout the sector. The defense network was more extensive than she had imagined, with automated platforms hidden in asteroid fields in deep space. Most importantly, several stations were already responding to her access codes and coming online after millennia of dormancy. The ancient civilization hadn't disappeared. They had evolved beyond physical form and departed for higher dimensions. But they had left their technology as a gift for species that showed wisdom and restraint. Humanity's peaceful exploration of space and respect for alien cultures had marked them as worthy inheritors. Elena's research notes, stored in ancient data crystals throughout the station, contained activation codes for the entire defense network. If she could reach the main ancient control center hidden in the station's core, she could protect, not just Earth, but all the smaller species threatened by the major powers' expansion plans. Dr. Crix returned with a team of specialists carrying interrogation equipment designed to extract information from unwilling subjects. The devices would cause significant pain, while ensuring Elena remained conscious and coherent throughout the process. They intended to learn everything she knew about ancient technology before eliminating her. Elena watched them set up their equipment while secretly charging the ancient devices hidden on her person. The energy fields were building slowly to avoid detection, but soon she would have enough power to escape her cell and reach the control center. The aliens were about to learn that their timid prisoner was far more dangerous than they had imagined. The interrogation began with Dr. Crix demanding Elena's research notes and activation procedures. When she refused to cooperate, the specialists activated their devices, sending waves of neural disruption through her body. Elena screamed convincingly while the ancient technology in her clothing protected her from the worst effects. Between bursts of artificial agony, Elena answered questions with carefully crafted lies that would send the aliens in wrong directions. She described fake activation sequences that would damage ancient devices if attempted. She provided false information about the defense network's capabilities and weaknesses. Dr. Crix grew increasingly frustrated as Elena's answers proved contradictory and useless. He ordered the specialist to increase the intensity, not realizing that Elena was using the energy from their devices to charge her own equipment. Every burst of neural disruption fed power into the ancient artifacts hidden throughout her clothing. Elena waited until the energy levels reached critical mass before making her move. The timid researcher who had entered the cell was about to disappear forever, replaced by something the aliens had never encountered before. A human pushed beyond all reasonable limits and armed with technology they couldn't comprehend. The aliens' biggest mistake hadn't been underestimating Elena's intelligence or courage. It had been giving her 3 years to prepare for this moment while believing she was too weak to be a threat. That miscalculation was about to cost them everything. Elena's scream cut off abruptly as she stopped pretending to be helpless. The ancient devices woven into her clothing discharged their stored energy in a coordinated burst that overloaded every piece of alien technology in the detention cell. Sparks flew from the interrogation equipment as Elena rose from the restraint chair like an avenging spirit. Dr. Crix stepped backward in shock, his crystalline features shifting through spectrum of colors that indicated extreme alarm. The 3 specialists fumbled for their weapons, but Elena was already moving with impossible speed. The ancient technology had enhanced her reflexes beyond anything the aliens had ever encountered. Elena's hand touched the cell's control panel, and the barrier dissolved instantly. The ancient circuits hidden in the station's infrastructure recognized her authority and responded without question. Emergency lights flickered as power was redirected to systems that had been dormant for thousands of years. The lead specialist, a Morphian shapeshifter, tried to assume Elena's appearance to confuse her. Elena smiled coldly and spoke a phrase in the ancient language that made the air itself solidify around the shapeshifter. The Morphian found himself trapped in a crystalline cage that formed from atmospheric gases, unable to change shape or move. Dr. Crix activated his personal communicator to call for reinforcements, but Elena gestured dismissively and the device crumbled to dust. The ancient technology could manipulate matter at the molecular level, breaking down complex structures and reforming them according to her will. The confident alien scientist was beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. Elena addressed the remaining aliens in perfect Zephyrian, then fluent Vortakian, followed by the click-based language of the insectoid Thrix species. Her voice carried harmonics that hurt their ears and made their defensive systems malfunction. She had learned to speak like the ancients, using sound frequencies that could affect both technology and biology. The 2 Vortakian specialists charged Elena with their forearms extended, confident that their superior strength would overcome any human resistance. Elena stood motionless until they were within striking distance, then moved in ways that defied physics. She flowed around their attacks like water, striking pressure points that paralyzed their nervous systems. Both Vortakians collapsed to the floor, conscious but unable to move. Elena had learned their species' anatomy during her years of careful observation. Every alien race aboard the station had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone with sufficient knowledge and the right tools. Dr. Crix backed against the wall, his crystalline form now pulsing with fear instead of anger. He demanded to know what Elena had become, how she had gained such impossible abilities. Elena's response came in the ancient language, translated simultaneously into 12 different alien tongues by the station's communication system. Elena explained that she wasn't enhanced by ancient technology. She was returning to what humans had once been. The ancients hadn't disappeared. They had evolved beyond physical limitations and became pure consciousness. But before their transformation, they had planted genetic seeds in promising species throughout the galaxy. Humanity was the latest incarnation of the ancient bloodline, designed to inherit their technology when the galaxy faced another period of aggressive expansion and warfare. Elena's quiet years of research had awakened dormant genetic sequences that connected her directly to the ancient network. The station shuddered as Elena's connection to the ancient systems grew stronger. Lights began functioning in sections that had been dark for centuries. Environmental controls optimized themselves for maximum efficiency. Defensive weapons that predated the current galactic civilization came online for the first time in millennia. Elena walked past the paralyzed aliens and into the corridor, where she found security teams converging on the detention level. The guards carried weapons designed to subdue different alien species, but they had no equipment rated for dealing with ancient technology. Elena raised her hand and their weapons simply stopped functioning. The lead security officer, a massive Vortakian warrior named Commander Thex, demanded Elena's immediate surrender. He threatened to use lethal force if she continued resisting lawful detention. Elena's laughter echoed through the corridors with harmonics that made the walls themselves vibrate ominously. Elena told Commander Thex that there was nothing lawful about a conspiracy to commit genocide. She had accessed the station's communication logs and discovered messages detailing the planned extermination of 17 inferior species. The three major powers had been using the research station as a base for coordinating their expansion strategy. Commander Thex tried to dismiss Elena's accusations as desperate lies, but she began projecting the conspiracy's communication records directly onto the corridor walls. Every species' representatives could see their own names on the extermination lists. The carefully maintained alliance between different alien factions began crumbling in real time. Elena continued walking through the station as chaos erupted around her. Species that had been marked for elimination began confronting their would-be executioners. The Morphians discovered that their shape-shifting abilities were being suppressed by ancient technology, leaving them vulnerable to retaliation from other species. The Zephyrians found their crystalline communication networks disrupted by harmonic interference that Elena was generating unconsciously. They could no longer coordinate their defensive positions or call for reinforcements from their fleet. The technological superiority they had relied upon was being systematically neutralized. Elena reached the main research levels to find alien scientists destroying evidence of their conspiracy. They were melting data storage devices and wiping computer systems, trying to eliminate any proof of their planned genocides. Elena's presence caused their equipment to malfunction, preserving the evidence they were trying to destroy. Dr. Crix appeared at the far end of the corridor, accompanied by the station's senior administrators from all three major powers. They had armed themselves with military-grade weapons and positioned themselves between Elena and the ancient control center, hidden in the station's core. Elena paused to study the assembled alien leadership. These were the beings who had dismissed her as a timid human female for 3 years. They had considered her beneath their notice, a primitive creature unworthy of their attention. Now they stood before her with weapons drawn, finally recognizing the threat she represented. But their recognition had come too late. Elena had spent 3 years preparing for this confrontation, learning their weaknesses and mapping their defenses. She had awakened ancient systems throughout the station and established contact with the dormant defense network. The timid researcher they remembered no longer existed. Elena smiled as she began walking toward the assembled alien leadership. Her enhanced abilities were still growing stronger as more ancient genetic sequences activated in response to the crisis. Soon she would reach the control center and complete the activation of the Galactic Defense Network. The aliens raised their weapons, preparing to make their final stand against the human they had created through their own arrogance and cruelty. They were about to learn that some prey animals, when cornered and threatened with extinction, became the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The alien leadership opened fire simultaneously, filling the corridor with energy beams designed to kill anything carbon-based. Elena stood calmly in the center of the barrage as ancient defensive systems activated around her. The attacks bent away from her body, redirected by gravitational fields that made space itself curve in impossible directions. Director Vex of the Morphean Council snarled in frustration as his weapon's energy beam curved back toward his own position. He dove for cover as his reflected shot scorched the wall where he had been standing. The other aliens quickly stopped firing, realizing their weapons were more dangerous to themselves than to Elena. Elena continued walking forward as if nothing had happened. Her footsteps echoed with harmonic frequencies that made the station's hull ring like a bell. Ancient power flowed through her body, connecting her to systems that had been dormant since before any of the current species had achieved spaceflight. Admiral Orcs of the Vortakian Empire drew a ceremonial blade that had been forged from meteoric metal and blessed by his species' war priests. He charged Elena with a battle cry that had terrified enemies across dozens of star systems. Elena caught the blade between her fingers without looking, and the ancient metal crumbled to powder at her touch. Elena placed her palm against Admiral Zorx's armored chest. Ancient technology analyzed his biology in microseconds, identifying the specific neural pathways that controlled his aggression and territorial instincts. A gentle pulse of energy rewrote those pathways, leaving the Vortakian warrior calm and confused about why he had been fighting. High Counselor Keth of the Zephyrian Assembly tried to retreat, but Elena spoke his true name in the ancient language. Zephyrians were crystalline beings whose consciousness was tied to specific harmonic frequencies. Elena's voice contained overtones that resonated with Keth's core frequency, forcing him to remain motionless despite his desperate desire to flee. Elena addressed the assembled aliens in a voice that carried across every communication channel on the station. She spoke in the ancient tongue, but the station's systems provided real-time translation into every known language. Her words reached every sentient being within 100 light-years. Elena announced that the galaxy's age of expansion through conquest was ending. The ancient defense network was coming online after millennia of dormancy, and it would protect developing civilizations from aggressive species that sought to dominate through force. Any attempts at genocide or forced subjugation would be met with overwhelming retaliation. Dr. Crix tried to argue that Elena was just one human with stolen technology, but his words were cut off as ancient monitoring systems began broadcasting evidence of the conspiracy across the Galactic communication network. Every species would soon know which governments had planned their extermination. Elena walked past the paralyzed alien leaders toward the station's core. The ancient control center was hidden behind layers of modern construction, but the station's AI systems were already removing barriers and clearing pathways. Elena had become the station's rightful commander, inheriting authority that superseded all other claims. Behind Elena, chaos was spreading throughout the station as species representatives turned against their former allies. The Thrix insectoids, who had been marked for enslavement, cornered Zephyrian scientists in the hydroponics bay. The crystalline beings found their hard light projections useless against creatures that communicated through pheromones and vibrations. The aquatic descendants, whose homeworld had been designated for strip mining, flooded sections of the station where Morphean infiltrators were hiding. The shapeshifters discovered that their abilities were limited when submerged in waters that contained trace minerals from the descendants' homeworld. Elena reached the core access chamber to find it sealed by emergency barriers that would require hours to breach with conventional tools. She placed her hands on the ancient lock mechanism, and the barriers dissolved instantly. The control center beyond had been waiting for her arrival since the day the station was built. The chamber contained a crystalline matrix that stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with energy patterns that matched Elena's enhanced neural activity. As she approached, the matrix began responding to her presence, activating systems that had been dormant for thousands of years. Elena touched the central control node and felt her consciousness expand across the galaxy. She could sense ancient monitoring stations in hundreds of star systems, defensive platforms hidden in nebulae and asteroid fields, and automated vessels that had been patrolling the void between galaxies. The defense network's scope was staggering. The ancients had foreseen the cyclical nature of galactic civilizations, where peaceful periods were inevitably followed by aggressive expansion and warfare. They had built safeguards to ensure that developing species would have protection when the next cycle began. Elena activated the network's primary protocols, establishing communication with defense platforms that immediately began moving toward strategic positions. Ships that had been disguised as asteroids powered up their engines and weapons. Space itself seemed to shimmer as defensive barriers formed around threatened star systems. Dr. Crix and the other alien leaders forced their way into the control chamber, supported by what remained of their security forces. They had overcome the paralysis Elena had inflicted, but their movements were still sluggish and uncoordinated. Ancient technology was continuing to affect their physiology in subtle ways. The aliens demanded that Elena deactivate the defense network and surrender herself for judgment by the Galactic Council. They claimed that she was disrupting the natural order of galactic civilization and threatening the stability of established governments. Elena turned from the control matrix to face her accusers. Her appearance had changed during her connection with the ancient systems. Her eyes now glowed with the same energy that powered the defensive network. Her voice carried harmonics that made reality itself listen and obey. Elena explained that the natural order they defended was built on the planned extinction of weaker species. The stability they cherished required the elimination of any civilization that might challenge their dominance. She had studied their communications for 3 years and knew their true intentions. The ancient defense network would not be used for conquest or aggression. It would protect developing civilizations until they were strong enough to defend themselves. It would prevent genocides and forced subjugations. Most importantly, it would ensure that no species could dominate the galaxy through fear and violence. Elena turned back to the control matrix as more ancient systems came online. The aliens raised their weapons again, but they hesitated. Elena was no longer just a human with stolen technology. She had become something new, a bridge between the ancient legacy and the current galactic civilization. Admiral Zorks spoke for the group, asking what Elena intended to do with her newfound power. His tone was respectful now, the artificial calm Elena had induced making him capable of rational thought. The other aliens waited for her answer, realizing that their choices had narrowed to cooperation or destruction. Elena's response would determine the fate of billions of sentient beings across the galaxy. The timid researcher who had been ignored and dismissed was now the most powerful individual in known space. The question was whether she would use that power wisely or become the very thing she had fought against. Elena remained connected to the ancient control matrix as she considered Admiral Zorks's question. The power flowing through her was intoxicating, offering the ability to reshape galactic civilization according to her will. She could feel the temptation to become the benevolent dictator the galaxy needed, ruling through superior technology and wisdom. But Elena remembered her 3 years of careful observation and the lessons they had taught her. Power corrupted even the most well-intentioned beings. The alien leadership standing before her had probably started with noble goals before descending into genocide and oppression. She would not repeat their mistakes. Elena spoke to the assembled aliens in her enhanced voice, explaining that the ancient defense network would not be used to establish human dominance. Instead, it would serve as a neutral protector, responding only to clear acts of aggression against developing civilizations. No single species would control the network's vast power. Dr. Crix protested that humans were too primitive to make such decisions responsibly. Elena's people had only achieved faster-than-light travel recently and lacked the wisdom that came from millennia of galactic experience. Humanity couldn't be trusted with technology that could destroy entire star systems. Elena smiled at the irony of Dr. Crix's argument. She reminded him that his experienced species had just attempted to commit genocide against 17 civilizations. The Morphians had been infiltrating and subverting other governments for decades. The Vortakians had been preparing to enslave entire star systems. Perhaps experience wasn't the same thing as wisdom. Elena disconnected from the control matrix and walked toward the chamber's exit. The alien leaders parted before her, no longer trying to block her path. They could sense the ancient technology that surrounded her like an invisible aura, ready to defend against any aggression. As they moved through the station corridors, Elena showed the aliens evidence of their conspiracy that the ancient systems had preserved. Communication logs detailed which species would be eliminated first and how their resources would be divided. Technical specifications described weapons designed specifically to bypass each species' natural defenses. Director Vex of the Morphean Council attempted to justify their plans by claiming they were necessary for galactic stability. Weaker species would inevitably develop dangerous technologies or form alliances that threatened established powers. Preemptive action was the only way to prevent larger conflicts. Elena countered that the ancients had faced similar justifications from aggressive species in their time. Every empire claimed that conquest was necessary for peace and stability. Every dictator argued that freedom was too dangerous for lesser beings. The cycle of oppression continued because no one was willing to break it. They reached the main conference chamber where representatives from all 12 species aboard the station had gathered. The smaller civilizations stood together on one side of the room, while the three major powers occupied the opposite side. The division that had always existed was now visible for everyone to see. Elena walked to the center of the chamber and activated the ancient communication systems. Her voice was broadcast across the galaxy as she addressed every sentient civilization within communication range. The quiet researcher who had been ignored for 3 years was about to reshape the political landscape of known space. Elena announced the formation of the Galactic Protection Alliance, a voluntary organization dedicated to preventing genocide and protecting developing civilizations. The ancient defense network would serve as the alliance's enforcement arm, but control would be shared among all member species equally. The three major powers would be allowed to join the alliance if they agreed to strict limitations on their military expansions and submitted to regular inspections of their weapons programs. Species that refused to join would find themselves isolated as trade. Agreements were restructured to favor alliance members. Counselor Keth demanded to know what gave humans the right to dictate terms to species that had achieved spaceflight before Earth was even habitable. Elena's response carried harmonics that made the crystal beings physically uncomfortable. She reminded him that might didn't create right, regardless of which species possessed it. Elena explained that the ancient defense network would protect the alliance from external threats while preventing member species from attacking each other. Wars of conquest would become impossible when automated defense platforms could neutralize entire fleets before they reached their targets. Admiral Orcs asked what would happen to species that had built their entire civilizations around military expansion. Elena's artificially induced calm was wearing off, and his natural aggression was reasserting itself. The Vortakian Empire had conquered dozens of star systems through superior military tactics. Elena acknowledged that some species would need to find new purposes beyond conquest and domination. The ancient records contained technologies that could revolutionize agriculture, medicine, and energy production. Former warrior cultures could become protectors and explorers instead of conquerors. The smaller species representatives began voicing their support for Elena's proposal. The Thrix hive minds spoke in unison about the benefits of protected development. The aquatic descendants expressed relief that their homeworld would be safe from strip mining. Even some individuals from the major powers admitted the alliance had merit. But Dr. Crix and his allies were not ready to accept their diminished status. They began coordinating through encrypted communications, planning one final attempt to seize control of the ancient technology. Elena was still just one human, regardless of her enhanced abilities. They had entire fleets waiting outside the station. Elena sensed their plotting through the ancient monitoring systems and sighed with genuine sadness. She had hoped that demonstrating the futility of opposing the defense network would be enough to prevent bloodshed. Some beings, however, would only learn through direct experience. Elena reestablished her connection to the control matrix and began activating additional ancient systems throughout the galaxy. Defensive platforms that had masqueraded as space debris for millennia powered up their weapons. Hidden shipyards began constructing vessels using technologies that surpassed anything the current civilizations possessed. The alien fleets lurking outside the station detected energy signatures they couldn't identify as ancient defense. Platforms revealed themselves. Weapons that could crack planets locked onto the invasion fleets, while gravitational manipulators prepared to trap entire armadas in spatial distortions. Elena offered the alien leadership one final chance to surrender peacefully and accept the Protection Alliance's terms. She projected images of their fleet surrounded by ancient vessels, completely outgunned and outnumbered. The time for negotiation was ending, and the consequences of their choices would be permanent. Dr. Crix made a desperate lunge for Elena, hoping to disrupt her connection to the ancient systems. Several other aliens joined the attack, convinced that killing her would shut down the defense network. They were about to learn that the transformation Elena had undergone was irreversible. Elena didn't move as the aliens reached her. Instead, she spoke a single word in the ancient language that made time itself slow around her attackers. They found themselves moving through air that had become thick as molasses while Elena remained unaffected. The timid researcher was gone forever, replaced by something that transcended the limitations of any single species. Elena had become the guardian the galaxy needed, whether its current rulers wanted her protection or not. Elena watched with detached calm as the alien leaders struggled against the temporal distortion field she had created. Their movements were so slow that she could examine each attacker individually, analyzing their expressions of hatred and desperation. Dr. Crix's crystalline features showed cracks of stress as he realized his calculations had been catastrophically wrong. Elena released the temporal field and the aliens collapsed to the floor, their momentum carrying them past where she had been standing. She hadn't moved. Instead, she had shifted her position through dimensional space using ancient technology that treated physical laws as suggestions rather than absolutes. The conference chamber fell silent as representatives from 12 species absorbed what they had witnessed. Elena had demonstrated abilities that surpassed anything in their historical records. She wasn't just enhanced by ancient technology. She had become something that transcended their understanding of biological limitations. Elena addressed the assembled beings with a voice that carried across dimensions. She explained that the ancient transformation was irreversible and permanent. She would serve as the galaxy's guardian for as long as sentient life required protection from those who would exploit or destroy it. Dr. Crix struggled to his feet, his crystalline form dim with exhaustion. He accused Elena of becoming the very tyrant she claimed to oppose. No single being should possess such power, regardless of their stated intentions. Elena's control of the ancient network made her the most dangerous dictator in galactic history. Elena acknowledged the validity of Dr. Crix's concerns. She had indeed become something that could threaten the freedom of every species in the galaxy. That was why she was establishing the Protection Alliance with built-in safeguards against the abuse of power. Elena revealed that the ancient transformation came with limitations designed to prevent exactly the corruption Dr. Crix feared. She could not use the defense network for conquest or personal gain. She could not eliminate species simply because she disagreed with their cultures or philosophies. The technology itself would resist any attempt to use it for oppression. More importantly, Elena was not immortal. The ancient transformation would last only as long as the galaxy needed active protection from aggressive expansion. When peace was truly established and maintained, the enhancement would fade, returning her to normal human limitations. Elena connected to the ancient systems one final time and demonstrated her sincerity by placing restrictions on her own authority. The defense network's weapons could only activate in response to clear acts of aggression against developing civilizations. Elena herself could be overruled by a unanimous vote of the Protection Alliance's member species. The smaller species representatives immediately voted to join the Protection Alliance. The Thrix, aquatic descendants, and 9 other civilizations formally requested ancient protection for their homeworlds and colonies. Within minutes, defensive barriers began forming around their star systems. The 3 major powers found themselves facing a choice that would define their civilization's futures. They could join the alliance and accept limitations on their expansion, or they could maintain their independence while being cut off from the protection and benefits of membership. High Counselor Keth was the first to break ranks with his former allies. The Zephyrian Assembly voted to join the Protection Alliance, citing the impossibility of opposing ancient technology. Keth publicly acknowledged his species' role in the genocide conspiracy and pledged to make reparations to threatened civilizations. Admiral Zorks required more convincing. The Vortakian Empire's entire culture was built around military conquest and territorial expansion. Accepting alliance membership would require fundamental changes to their society's structure and values. Elena offered to help the Vortakians redirect their warrior culture toward exploration and protection rather than conquest. The galaxy contained countless mysteries and dangers that required brave beings willing to face the unknown. The Empire's soldiers could become guardians of the Alliance's frontier. Territories Director Vex and the Morphean Council remained defiant until Elena demonstrated the defense network's ability to detect shapeshifters regardless of their assumed forms. Ancient scanners could identify Morphean infiltrators through quantum signature analysis, making their espionage capabilities useless against Alliance security. Faced with the choice between cooperation and irrelevance, the Morphean Council reluctantly agreed to join the Protection Alliance. They would withdraw their agents from other species' governments and submit to regular inspections of their intelligence operations. Dr. Crix stood alone as the sole remaining opponent of the Alliance. His research had been the foundation of the genocide conspiracy, and his hatred of humanity burned too brightly for him to accept Elena's authority. He demanded trial by combat according to ancient Zephyrian tradition. Elena accepted the challenge, though she warned Dr. Crix that the outcome was predetermined. The ancient enhancement made her effectively invulnerable to conventional attacks, while her connection to the defense network gave her access to weapons beyond his comprehension. The trial by combat was brief and decisive. Dr. Crix channeled the full power of his crystalline biology into energy, attacks that should have vaporized any carbon-based life form. Elena absorbed his attacks harmlessly and responded with a gentle touch that disrupted his molecular structure. Dr. Crix crumbled to dust, his consciousness preserved in the ancient systems as a warning to future generations about the dangers of genocide and oppression. Elena felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only sadness that wisdom had come too late for him to benefit from it. The Protection Alliance's charter was signed by representatives of 14 species within hours of Dr. Crix's defeat. The remaining alien fleets outside the station powered down their weapons and requested permission to join the Alliance's defensive forces. Elena established Alliance headquarters on the research station, transforming it from a center of conspiracy into a beacon of hope for developing civilizations. The ancient control center became a meeting place where species could resolve disputes peacefully under the protection of the defense network. Months later, Elena stood in her old laboratory, now converted into an educational center where young beings from dozens of species learned about ancient history and technology. The quiet researcher who had been ignored and dismissed had become the galaxy's most respected leader. Elena smiled as she watched students from formerly hostile species working together on research projects. The Zephyrian younglings were teaching Vortakian cubs about crystal harmonics, while Morphean shapeshifters helped Thrix larvae understand adaptive biology. The transformation Elena had undergone was gradually fading as peace spread throughout the galaxy. Her enhanced abilities were returning to normal human levels, though her knowledge and experience remained intact. The ancient technology had served its purpose and was preparing for the next cycle. Elena's greatest achievement wasn't defeating a room full of powerful aliens or activating an ancient defense network. It was proving that even the most timid and overlooked individuals could change the course of galactic history when circumstances demanded courage. The galaxy had learned that appearances could be deceiving, and that underestimating others based on preconceptions was a dangerous mistake. Elena's legacy would endure long after her enhanced abilities faded, inspiring future generations to look beyond surface impressions and recognize the potential that existed in every sentient being. Elena Vasquez, the timid human researcher who everyone had dismissed, had become exactly what the galaxy needed. A guardian who understood that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to protect.